hope it works, sir.
It does indeed work. I think people can hear me anyway. Great. Hope everyone had a good lunch. Silk Legal is an interesting company, and how we got into cannabis is also an interesting story. I think it was basically last man out the door, and I got stuck behind. But it was a part of the business that we developed some years ago with Kun Kitty, who is quite famous in Thailand. And we've done a few joint events with her. And we also developed a relationship with quite a number of companies coming into Thailand. So part of this discussion, whilst you see it's about Laos and Cambodia initially, that was set up some 2 years ago, and this conference was in planning. And pre-COVID, pre-restrictions, and things were starting to hop in those countries and move along quite nicely. And you'll see in the presentation where we're at now. What I've also taken the liberty of doing for people of interest is to talk about the industry in Thailand and some of the pitfalls that is coming through now. And part of it are avoidable, and part of them are not avoidable, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now let me work the technology. We are a technology firm, so I should be able to do that. Apparently not. Okay. Try again. Nah, it's not registered for some reason. Okay. We're going to go manual. Next slide. I've got it. Try again. I've used the buttons. I think it's either out of batteries or not registered. How are we going? Someone got it going. Okay, that's myself. That was a photo taken 10 years in the future, but that's fine. Basically, let me tell you a little bit about myself and why I can talk about this with some authority. This is my, believe it or not, 34th year in Thailand. I came here in '88 as a 6-month assignment, became a Thai national in '98, and been here ever since, basically in banking, finance, and law. So been around for quite a while. I've also been chairman, CEO of a number of listed companies in Singapore, Australia, and in the US in NASDAQ. So had a bit of experience in running businesses, and part of that will come out because unlike the usual law speak, we're talking about this from a commercial aspect as well. So if I can have the next slide. Okay, so the question is, will the emerald triangle ever shine green? One of the issues you have is people talk a lot about Thailand, but also in the back chat, in the blog sites, people are pretty, if I can use the word, pretty high about Laos and Cambodia as well. And those two countries became very interesting. We were pre-pandemic doing a lot of working in Laos as well, with a number of companies looking at entry into Laos from the point of view of grow and extraction. And we'll talk about some of the issues that they hit as well. So if I can have the next slide. It's not just me, you see. I've cursed it. So, medical hemp in Laos. Well, basically, up until today, it's a no-no. What was happening pre-pandemic was there was a lot of interest in running this through their board of investment and developing laws and regulations, and they actually had a committee set up to deregulate hemp, medical hemp, in Laos. Now, this is quite interesting because we met a number of companies in Laos that already had grow, and they were already doing extractions. We came back 6 months later, and there weren't any companies doing this. And what they'd done is they'd received permission from the provinces to grow, but they hadn't got federal permission, and they were shut down. So a lot of people lost a lot of money in Laos in terms of early entry into the cannabis market. You know, there's still a lot of places in Laos where you can buy your happy pizzas and all the rest, but it's all under the table stuff. None of it is of commercial scale. Next slide. The the regulatory environment in Laos, they looked at the law not long ago, 2009, and don't forget in these countries, as you well know, Thailand, Cambodia, predominantly in Laos, this is a traditional food. It's a traditional medicine. It's a traditional additive to many foods. But what happened is that they did, in fact, change the law where the use of cannabis in any form, whether CBD, THC, etc., is still illegal. So not good news in terms of the commercial viability of Laos. Next slide. The bottom line is that there are people in Laos doing sub-commercial operations. A lot of the crops coming into Thailand reputedly come from Laos, some from Myanmar, but there was a porous border there. I was in Nong Khai last week, and I can assure you the border's a lot stricter now with COVID, but there's a porous border, and people were bringing in product from Laos before. However, strictly speaking, it's illegal, and at the present time, to get into Laos costs you $750 for a visa, and you wear a tracking device for your duration in Laos. Not really the best environment at the moment. So we can write that off. Next slide. Liberalisation, as I said, this is an extra slide, basically saying, look, they're really interested in it. It is a poor country. They are interested in following Thailand. They do have large areas of land available, and they are a relatively low-cost producer. A lot of potential, not there yet. Next slide. Cambodia. Cambodia is one of the biggest traditional users of cannabis. And when I say the word cannabis, I'm talking of the plant. The biggest users of cannabis in this region. And it's traditionally found in foods, traditionally found in medicines, and it was, until recently, prevalent in Cambodia. What happened is, after the Pol Pot regime and the UN came in, the UN was backed heavily by the US government, and they strictly enforced the UN Unified Code on narcotics, and they banned cannabis as well as many other drugs in Cambodia. And there's a whole lot of semi-government organizations that make a very nice living enforcing these rules and regulations. So it's a place where there's potential. It's a place with a history of usage. It's a place where it is more liberal and more advanced than Laos, but it has its problems. Next slide. So, as you can see, happy pizzas, happy herbal pizzas are everywhere. Just because a Cambodian person is allowed to use cannabis in traditional medicines and in foods doesn't mean that same liberal nature has been extended to foreigners. So whilst there is a subculture of usage, it's not of a commercial grade. So what I'm saying is potential, but you've got to be careful. The enforcement of these laws is sporadic. You can see people consuming most parts of Phnom Penh one day, and the next day the police will have a raid. So also it's quite dangerous in terms of staying away from these sort of problems. Next slide. So the regulatory environment is, as I said, the 96 law gives some open usage, some limited usage in traditional medicines and culinary usage, but that's only for Cambodians. It's not for foreigners. So again, the Drug Control Acts of 2013-15 mean that the growth of cannabis in Cambodia is off the table at this stage. Next slide. So, summary again. This is not good news, but they, as they do in many countries, they've put marijuana, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines in the same bucket, and they're part of the 5 priorities which have been announced by Prime Minister, etc., in his office. So, again, good potential, probably not there yet. Next slide. Again, This is quite an ironic photo. So here we have the Prime Minister of two countries shaking hands on their anti-drug, and of course the Prime Minister of President of the Philippines is not known for his leniency in this regard. So it's a pretty good sign there that this is not probably a place you want to be on the wrong side. Okay, next slide, please. The reality on the ground. Fine, next slide. Okay, so it comes down to, and if it was more interesting in Cambodia and Laos, I'd spend more time there, but the bottom line is it's not very interesting at the moment. Cambodia's opened up to tourism. That's fantastic. But my personal belief is Laos will move quicker because of a number of reasons. When it does open the border, the economic situation in Laos is dire. Their alternate investments are few and far between, and the ability to get changes to legislation, if it's seen advantageous, is quite quick. So that's probably a place, once the borders are opened up, to look at. There's potential there. So let's talk about Thailand and cannabis and hemp regulations. I know there's going to be a lot of speakers talking about this, so I'll take a different tact. And I talk about it smoke and mirrors in somewhat on the cannabis regulations in Thailand. And the first reason is the Thai government talks of, and the media talks of, cannabis. Now, in Thai language, there's a particularly good word. You've got ganja and ganchom being hemp. And they full well know that, but they prefer to use the English word cannabis because it has more appeal. It is, in many senses, a publicity attempt by the various agencies to make Thailand more attractive for investment. So when they talk about the cannabis laws, they're really focusing on the plant. And when they focus on the plant, they're focusing on hemp and medical hemp. There's no talk of any recreational use at this stage, and probably not in the near future or medium term. Many people who've lived in Thailand know that the social problems in Thailand just with alcohol, they're unlikely to open up other recreational drugs. It's just unlikely, and it's also counter to the nature of the current government, that it was enforcing strict Buddhist principles, and they don't see this as, they see this as contrary to those principles. But look, there's been many changes, and there's many laws that have been put in place where cannabis has effectively, parts of cannabis have been effectively decriminalized. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean the growing of certain genotypes of hemp and limited degree mid-THC hemp has been decriminalized, provided that you grow the government's approved seeds and genotypes. So when we say decriminalized, we're saying in a very narrow way. You'll remember some time ago, Anutin, head of the Pumjai Thai, proudly said that every Thai will soon be able to grow 5 cannabis plants in their backyard. Did everyone remember that? So he came out proudly saying that. Well, the regulations came in. And yeah, you can grow 5 plants. If you want to look at them, you can't cut them down, you can't use them, you can't sell them, you can't do anything with them, but you can grow 5 plants. So what we're saying is the laws were put in place, but they were there more because politicians said they had to be there than they had any practical effect. And this is some of the problems that we're having from the legal point of view in getting licenses and getting permits for a lot of people. And this has led to something I'm talking about later on. There are a lot of scams. We've probably got perhaps half a dozen court cases dealing with scams in this area. We've probably got 40 court cases dealing with PPE, rubber glove scams. But this is also one of the areas there's been a lot of scammers, people looking at a quick buck. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So, regulations there. The regulations are moving towards liberalisation of the laws for one particular purpose, to make Thailand more attractive as a medical tourism and a tourism destination. This is not about export. This is not about production in any other way, but to make Thailand more attractive globally as a destination for people in medical and tourism. Next slide. So, cannabis, we talk about. They use that to mean all plants, but what they're really talking about is low THC hemp, and that's clearly where it's aimed at. Also, when we talk about the liberalization, they're not liberalizing the growth of hemp. Growing crops in Thailand, agriculture, is a profession, a calling, strictly reserved for the Thai population. That will never change. Hemp was brought in originally up in the far north as a substitute crop for opioids. So they put in hemp. They're extending that further into the impoverished areas of Thailand to provide extra income for farmers. But it's unlikely that they'll tolerate, or will be tolerated, foreign intervention in the growth of hemp in this country. So, next slide, please. Of course, there's many uses for hemp. And one of the problems I see with a lot of the clients that come to see me is quite honestly, they're following the North American model. And the North American model is, hey, we grow this stuff, we squeeze the hell out of it, we take the extracts and we go flog that, or we dry the leaves and we'll flog that, and that's huge profits. Yeah, well, no. The problem is there is a lot of parts of hemp which are very attractive to certain industries. It's not the money spinner that it was not now, was in North America, but it is a viable industry. And I'm very pleased to see here today a lot of people who are looking at the medical hemp industry as being predominantly focused on biomass, because that's where the money is and that's where the future is. The extracts are great, and there's future for all of that, but the upstream is much more valuable than the downstream. And similarly, companies that can use the entire plant are going to be successful versus those who are focusing on the extracts. Next slide. So, we have issues. Look, even if Thailand were to liberalize the cannabis industry, and this slide was supposed to point out this, even if it could liberalize the cannabis industry, you can't sell a lot of the products because of the UN Convention. The Single Convention on Narcotics states that sales of prescribed drugs are still limited on G-to-G basis. And I recall a case where Canada tried to export cannabis to South America or South America to Canada, and the UN got involved and the shipments were stopped. So there's a tremendous amount of issues in shipping, especially THC products internationally. CBD is on the agenda, and the United Nations have actively debated decriminalizing CBD products, and I think that is on the cards. THC is still being fought against, and with the backing of the US and their prime vote at the UN, it's unlikely that THC will be decriminalized in the near future. So therefore, the possibility is in the midterm, there will be some international sales of CBD products outside the G2G area, which is outside the medical area, experimental research area. Next slide. Oops, sorry, the previous slide is something a point I needed to make. Again, look at the legislation and see how it's focused on retaining the industry and the profitability of the industry in Thailand with the 2/3 shareholding requirements. Usually, and we're a law firm and we do 100 of Thai majority companies a year, 51% is sufficient. Well, 70% is actually very unusual in Thailand to have a 2/3 majority of directors or shareholders being Thai for any industry. So it's a prohibitive issue in setting up companies involved in this particular area. There's ways around it, and we charge a lot of money to tell you how to do that, but there are legal ways around it. We're lawyers after all. But it is something that you need to be aware of. Part of this will go into my next discussion, which is really very interesting on the scams and the other things that are happening in the area. But anyway, so here we are, import-export, limited, 2/3 majority. It's Thai business for the grow side, and they want to make it as much Thai as possible for the upstream as well. Next slide. So, export. We can talk about that. The 21, you can get a license to import, export, distribute and use hemp. hemp, and various products. So if you're looking at the biomass side, there is possibilities to work effectively in the hemp area. It's not prescribed in any convention that I'm aware of, so it's just a matter of getting the particular permits. When you get into the extracts, the etc., then that's where the difficulties lie. Next slide. So, Food and Drug Administration came out, and this is the intro into my next part, not so long ago, and said, hey, be careful of companies that come and approach you to grow cannabis in Thailand. You need to provide the precise strain. You need to declare what you intend to grow. You need to have information where you'll be supplying to, and you'll need to demonstrate where you're sourcing the seeds from. So they put in place a number of restrictions which they communicated to the farmers, cooperatives, etc., which narrowly define what you can do. I believe there's still only 4 strains of hemp that can be grown, and they're looking at 4 strains of quote-unquote medical hemp, which may evolve, but you can't grow any more. If you've got the super strain you've got in Canada or the US, if you bring it here, it'll be a research-only product, in which case research-only is an interesting one. Research only means you get none of it at the end. So it's a dead end there, but it is something you can do, theoretically. Next slide. Exporting. Again, there are laws in place. Mostly the import-export of cannabis products, and we're talking now of THC products, is black market only. And the G to G import-export of THC is limited to medical research. You've got to sit back and wonder why you would spend a lot of time trying to circumvent these laws, given that the US and Canada probably have 2 or 3 years supply, global supply, of THC and CBD products sitting in warehouses in the US. So I don't know what the business model is of people spending time trying to do that out of Thailand, but you know, here's the facts. It's illegal. The UN will stop you. The government will stop you. You can get around certain things, but you will eventually hit a brick wall. Next slide. So, fantasy. Cannabis medical treatments are readily and freely available. Well, yeah, they are available, but it's CBD or turpentine or whatever, and it's through registered practitioners, which is quite a few, but it is available. Once I get approval, it's legal for me to have cannabis. Well, the prescription card, which you're still required to have, talks about CBD. So if cannabis is an extract from the cannabis plant and CBD, that's legal. Police won't worry about cannabis as it's been legalized. Yeah, well, we'll go down to Klong Prem jail and talk to a few people there about that. I don't think so. It's always a good thing for the police if they're short a few dollars at the end of the month to go round up a few pot smokers, and that still happens. Thailand's ample supply of cannabis for medical prescriptions. This is interesting. The 4th one. There isn't, and there is a market there, of course, and there's a potential there. The problem if the GPO products and a lot of the products are coming through is that they are from bad crops. They are full of metals and products which are deleterious to the person, but they're cheap and they're being produced and they're being distributed. Funny story, anecdotal story. As a good lawyer, I went to one of these clinics and said, look, I'd like a prescription of CBD because I'm not sleeping. So he said, he goes out the back and get the card and pay the money, the 3,000-4,000 baht, and I got the money and go home. And he said, be very careful about this. So, okay, it looked like a black substance, very much like motor oil. So I took a drop of that, nothing happened. Took 2 drops of that, nothing happened. The 3rd night, I just drank the whole bottle. Still nothing happened, other than I got an upset stomach. So it just tells you the efficacy of these products being sold through the traditional areas. I mean, theoretically, if that was CBD and THC, as they said, I should be sleeping for the next month. But obviously, what's being sold is pretty much a subgrade product. So there is a lot of potential in improving that, and I think that the government is realizing that they need professional involvement in that side of the industry. So there is potential to supply in that side of the industry, absolutely. I can grow the 6 plants in my house. Well, we just told you about that. You can grow them, you can look at them, that's about it. So that one's going nowhere. Next slide, please. So, okay. So, sounds promising. There are avenues: hemp, biomass, improving the CBD consistency from a pharmacological point of view. There are potentials there. Developing an industry in cosmetics, upstream, health products, there is potential there. There's quite a deal of potential, but we have to be in mind of the first part, which is this was designed as a tourism, medical tourism, and an industry to improve the general livelihood of Thai people. So working within those constraints, that's what you have to work with from the regulatory point of view. Short side note, laws and regulations in Thailand. I'm an Australian lawyer, have practiced for many years. We come from a common law country. Thailand's laws come from Germany. They're civil law, German and Japanese. But with an interesting twist. They're written so broadly that you really, other than directional, you don't know the outcome. You can look at one law and take it to 3 different government departments, and they'll have 3 different views on it. And everyone who's lived in Thailand is smiling, and they totally agree. There is no definitive answer. When a regulation comes out, you've really got to try it and move it forward. So when you come to me and say, look, there's a new regulation on export, I'll say, yeah, that's great, let's try. And maybe the first time it doesn't get through, maybe the second time it does, but all of this is discretionary. And that's the word that they use in Thailand a lot. It's up to the officer's discretion. So when we look at this, be aware that whilst it says something in the translation, that may not be the way they implement it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, traditional medicines. A lot of people are interested in traditional medicines. In Thailand, traditional medicines are generally medicines that were provided to the vast majority of people on a charitable basis or a free of charge basis. Anyone who talks about having links to traditional medicine is talking about a link to a charity. A temple's a charity. Most of these organizations are charities. So if you're feeling very charitable, you can get involved. There's no business commercial sense in a lot of this traditional medicine. So you've got to be very careful of being drawn into being involved in traditional medicine from a commercial point of view because of this nature of the medicine, which is really low cost, mass appeal, and generally run by charities or people with greater moral aspirations and looking for small returns from it, doing good for the community. So traditional medicine is really interesting, and it's one where I think the potential is to develop this so it's attractive for international tourism. But at the moment, traditional medicine really is a low-cost alternate for the vast majority of Thais, and the amount of profitability in this has always been suspect. So you've got to be careful that you're not just basically entering a charity. Next slide. The partnership scam. When I came to Asia, there was one saying that still sticks in my mind, and that is, everyone can fool a foreigner. So the partnership scam is you will be approached by many, many people who say, I've been in Thailand 32 years, not like me, and we can help you. We know Thais who can do this for you. We have people who can assist you get the rules and regulations done. We can help you get a partnership in place. Look, honestly, if you want a partnership, you can talk to the Thai governments. They'll point you in the direction of people interested in partnerships. You don't need someone skimming 30, 40, 50% in the middle with very little other commitment to be part of this. You don't really need to partner with foreign organizations to enter this industry. And if you do, the vast majority of them will let you down. You'll be paying what we call the advanced purchase scam. That is, it'll get so far and they'll come back to you and ask for money before they've delivered an outcome. Be very careful of this. We saw quite a number of people approach us with this. If they're not heavily rooted in the Thai community, based in the Thai community, then be very wary of foreigners offering an easy entry to the market. Okay, next one. And we talked about the traditional medicine. Join me. We've got all of these outlets. We've got all these traditional medicine people who are able to take your product. We've got the entry. Well, sure, if you want to enter a charity, that's fine. You could knock on any temple, government organization, charitable organization. They'll all be very happy to entertain you, provided you bring your money with you. And this is what traditional medicine is at the moment. What I've emphasized is it will evolve, and it is evolving. And if you're very careful about it, there is a business there, and that's an international business and developing into a much more refined product and offering than it is today. But guess what? Every single hospital group, and we've dealt with them, they've been our clients, are doing this. Every single hospital group who's got infrastructure in place, hospitals in place, doctors, permits are all doing this. So it is becoming highly competitive. So you have the bottom end, which is the charity, and the top end, which is the international tourism pitch, and that is being driven heavily by the major hospital chains here, and also resorts, but predominantly hospitals. Next one, please. The sharecrop scam. This is one that was popular about a decade, 2 decades ago, where you could invest in mango plantations, guava plantations, teakwood plantations. So people are now giving you the option to invest in cannabis plantations. The only problem is I'm scratching my head to see how you define which part of the plantation is yours and how they're going to stick a label in every one of those cannabis plants. So I think this whole cannabis sharecrop, and this is one of the things that it's in the Bangkok Post, saying, look, if you're a farmer, if someone comes to you and says, hey, grow this crop for me, be really careful. And if you're an investor and they say, hey, we're going to sell you 20% of our crop, be really careful as well, because there may not be any match between what's being grown and what you've paid for. And I'm going to give you the other problem, of course. This is a securities offering. It's illegal under Thai law. You're offering someone an investment in security, which you need a debenture and you need permission and you need to be registered. So straight away I'm going to tell you this is illegal and you're going to lose your money. So be careful. Okay, next one. So this is the thing that's limiting the growth outside of Thailand. So business, short term, because of this monster of a legislation that you've got to deal with, means that your focus is going to be bringing people into Thailand to consume, use, enjoy your product, and developing an industry based upon a holistic approach towards cannabis, rather than focusing on one part of the biomass, one part of the plant. Next slide. And when you're jumping on the bandwagon, or you want to join the bandwagon, just remember due diligence is something that is cheap to start with, and it's expensive to fix later on. As a lawyer, should tell you, please, the more you do, the better we like it, because we have to untangle this at the end. But do get someone who understands it. Look, I'll give you another example of this, and this has happened not 1, 3 or 4 times. People have come to me with partnerships with universities and medical institutes and said, hey, I don't understand this. I said, well, what don't you understand? Look, I've just spent $250,000 to partner with this university. I said, yes. And I have a partnership agreement. Yep. And I signed it. Yep. And why'd you sign it? Because there are other people looking. Okay, what does it say? Research into Thai herbal products, including cannabis. So what's happening now? Well, I went to the university and they're researching turmeric and ginger, no cannabis. That's what you signed, buddy. That's what you got. So again, a little bit of due diligence is important. And understand that you need to consider who you're dealing with, what they're trying to achieve when they're partnering with you, what you're bringing to the table, and hopefully it's more than just money, and what they're bringing to the table. And hopefully it's more than quote-unquote relationships, because all of those things are easy to replace. And all of those things mean that at the end there's going to be some disconnect. Their expectation is a lot more money. Your expectation as a business, there's a disconnect. Next slide. So that's about us. If you want to talk later, we're in a roundtable. We're online. We have quite a number of resources available. I've got a good infographics on all the laws and regulations to cultivate hemp in Thailand and grow and sell hemp in Thailand. It's on our website. I don't have it here today because you couldn't read it. It'd be so small, the writing. There's so many laws and regulations, but it's available there, as well as updates on any of the major legislation and changes. So I think at this point, I'm pretty much out of time. Unless we taking questions. Anyone has questions? No, we're not taking questions there for the round table. There we go. So that means you've got to stay around till 5:15 when we've got the round table. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Mr. Paul Crosio, partner of Upskilling Legal Thailand.